Hello again, gamers. Welcome back for another episode of Grokking Battletech. I'm the board game captain, and today I'm going to be ranking the cluster anti-clan weapons of the clan invasion time period. This is a bit of a follow-up to a previous video I did where I ranked the armor-piercing anti-clan weapons of the clan invasion time period, and I asked if people would like to see a follow-up, and I got a couple specific responses from some of my viewers. I want to give a shout-out to Azarand and Very Silent Mouse, who specifically requested I do this video in the comments there, so this episode is for you, Azarand and Very Silent Mouse. Now, this is a video that's going to have a lot more weapons to be ranked than the predecessor did, because there are quite a few cluster weapons that show up at some point during the clan invasion. There are a lot. So I did omit a few. One in particular was the LRM-5. And the reason is that even though you roll on the cluster hits table, the LRM-5 never has more than a single cluster. So it doesn't really feel like a cluster hit weapon to me because you don't have at least two clusters, not even the possibility for two clusters. So I've decided to omit the LRM-5 from this list. I also omitted the Ultra Autocannons 10 and 20, which were both already in the armor-piercing weapons list. Now, I didn't omit them because they were in the armor-piercing weapons list. I omitted them because they only did two clusters with large armor-piercing hits and really felt more like armor-piercing weapons than cluster hit weapons to me. I did include, though, the LB-10 and 20X autocannon, though those were in the armor-piercing list, because of the fact that with the cluster rounds, it's impossible to ignore that these are definitely cluster weapons. They're multi-purpose. They can be both armor-piercing and cluster equally with very good measure in both. So those are going to be in this list. So let's run down. I'm going to give you the weapons that are in this list, and then I'm going to be giving you the categories we are going to rank them in. So I'm going to rank them in each category. Now, each category is going to get a ranking. It's going to go S, A, B, C, D, and F. F is total failure. S is way superior. And I'm going to give them a ranking in each category. In each category, they earn points. 0 points for an F, 1 for a D, 2 for a C, 3 for a B, 4 for an A, 5 for an S. And that those point scores totaled up will give me the entire ranking for each weapon that I will then give you at the end of this video on, again, an S through F basis. So the weapons that are going to be in this video are the LB-2X autocannon, the LB-5X autocannon, the LB-10X autocannon, the LB-20X autocannon, the Ultra Autocannon 2, the Ultra Autocannon 5, the LRM-10, LRM-15, and LRM-20, as well as the MRM-10, MRM-20, MRM-30, and MRM-40, the SRM-2, the SRM-4, the SRM-6, the streak versions of all of those, and the rocket launchers 10, 15, and 20 are all going to be ranked in this video. Now, the categories, I've added one more category beyond the categories that were in the armor-piercing video. So the categories I have are damage, and then added on clusters because I felt it was too important to not give it its own category. The amount of clusters that actually come out of the weapon is very important for weapons that you're using to crit seek, which is really what the cluster weapons are all about. Then range, heat, space and weight, and intangibles for all the little extra things that are not under any of these other categories. All right, so without any further ado, let's get into it with damage. So first, for the F rank of damage, we have one and only one weapon that is so bad when it comes to dealing out damage of any of these. It's in the F rank. You probably already guessed it. It is the LB-2X autocannon. So the LB-2X autocannon has two choices of ammunition to fire. Its standard shot does 2 damage. Its cluster shot does 1 to 2 damage in 1 to 2 clusters. This is not a lot of damage. I'm sorry. This is... No, you know what? I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry because this is a terrible weapon. You'll see as we go on. There are a few things that this weapon does excel at, but they are limited. and one of them is not damage. Yeah, just does not do a lot. So let's move on. Next, we're going to be moving on to the D ranking for damage, and for the cluster hit weapons. For the D ranking, we have the LB5X autocannon, we have the Ultra Autocannon 2, and we have the SRM2. So we have 3 times as many weapons in the D ranking as the F ranking, but still not really a lot. But these are all weapons that are only marginally better at dealing out damage to your enemy than the LB2X autocannon. You have the LB5X, which could do a solid shot, could do 5 damage. It's not a lot, but it's not bad. But when it does cluster rounds, on average, it does 3 with a maximum possible of 5. It's not great. The Ultra Autocannon 2 either does 2 damage or 4 damage. Again, not great. This is not very good. And the SRM2 is essentially the same. It's exactly the same as the Ultra Autocannon 2. I mean, in damage. Of course, it's different in other categories, but we're not talking about those other categories right now. So for all those reasons, those are going to be in the D category. Now let's move on to the C category for the damage. For the C category, we're moving up into things that are much more acceptable in the amount of damage that they are putting out. We have the LB10X autocannon with its ability to either do a solid shot of 10 or when it's doing cluster shots, you know, it's doing an average of 5, maybe 6 damage, but could do up to a maximum of 10. Of course, it can get lower, but you know, generally, on average, this is a more acceptable amount of damage to be dealing out for the cluster weapons. Then we have the Ultra Autocannon 5 that is going to do either 5 damage in one place or 5 damage in 2 places, basically. We have the LRM-10 that is basically in the exact same position with its cluster hits as the LB-10X autocannon, except it does it in groups of up to 5 damage rather than spreading out. But we're not talking about clusters yet. Damage-wise, it's doing roughly the same amount of damage. Then we have the MRM-10. Again, you have the exact same situation. Then we have the SRM-4. Now, this is, on average, usually putting out about 2 missiles doing 2 damage apiece, maybe 3 missiles doing 2 damage apiece, up to a possible 4 missiles doing 2 damage apiece, which a little different, you know. Rather than having clusters of 5 or clusters of 1, we've got clusters of 2 damage with the SRM-4, but roughly equivalent. Now we also have our first Streak missile launcher. We have the Streak SRM-2. Now this is always going to put out 2 missiles that do 2 damage each. I decided to include it here because it's guaranteed. It's never going to be less. It's never going to be more. It's guaranteed 2 missiles doing 2 damage each. It felt a little better to me. This might be an arbitrary place to put it on this list, but I had to put it somewhere. And it's a little hard to figure out with the Streaks exactly where to put them since they don't vary as much. Now, finally, we have the Rocket Launcher 10, which is here for the same reason that all the other 10 missile launcher weapons, the MRM-10, the LRM-10 are here, is that it basically does the exact same amount of damage. So, all right, let's move on to the B ranking. Now we're getting into actually fairly good amounts of damage for what you are paying for these weapons. The B ranking is the first time where I really feel like you're properly starting to get your money's worth, as it were. So the first thing we have in the B ranking is the LRM-15. This has a possibility at rolling epic, a possibility of 3 5 damage groups, 15 damage total. Granted, on average, you're going to be doing about half of that, but still, generally speaking, that is good. That is a good amount of damage. Next, we also have the SRM-6 that, again, at maximum is going to do 6 missiles doing 2 damage each. Granted, average, you're probably only doing about 3, but you could roll high and you could roll low, and which is why the Streak SRM-4 is also here because you're guaranteed to get 4 missiles doing 2 damage each, which again, it improves it in my estimation. There's no chance to roll terribly and just get like 1 missile hitting. Then we have the Rocket Launcher 15, which is also in the B rank for the same reason of all the other missile weapons that shoot 15 missiles. Now moving to the A rank, these are very good weapons for their damage output. We have the LB-20X autocannon that can do a maximum of 20 damage with its cluster rounds, or again, remember, it has solid shots. It can fire a 20-round solid shot and do 20 damage. Granted, that's not very good for the cluster weapon side of this, but it will be something that I'll be taking into account in the intangibles, of course. Next in the A rank, we have the LRM-20. Again, pouring out a possible 20 damage, though on average, usually about half of that. MRM-20 for the same exact reason. And then we have the Streak SRM-6, because you're guaranteed 6 missiles when you hit, 6 missiles that do 2 damage each. And finally, the Rocket Launcher 20, for the same reason that all of the other missile weapons that do 20 shots are in the A rank. So moving along, we're going to go to the S rank. Now, the S rank is a heck of a lot smaller. Only 2 weapons made it to the S rank. These are weapons that just deal out ludicrous amounts of damage, and they are the MRM-30 and the MRM-40. Now, I had a lot of trouble with this. Obviously, the MRM-40 is head and shoulders above the MRM-30. It has a total of 10, possibly more damage being dealt out by it, but it felt like in the damage ranking itself, I really needed an extra ranking. There were just so many different varieties of weapons, so many different classifications, that it's like I needed an S+, but of course I can't do that for a single ranking. So what I decided to do was I put both the MRM-30 and MRM-40 here. However, I will be giving extra points in the intangibles area to the MRM-40 to balance out the fact that it really should have gotten even more points for the damage ranking. So we will come back to that again shortly. Okay, so the next category is clusters. Now, the amount of clusters you shoot out with cluster weapons is very important because these weapons are generally used for crit seeking. You want lots of clusters to find the holes that are punched by the armor-piercing weapons. So a lot of weapons in this list really only deal out 1, maybe 2 clusters. And that's a problem. 1 to 2 clusters is not a lot. And that makes all of these particular weapons rank very, very low. And there's quite a few. So we have the LB2X autocannon. We have the Ultra Autocannon 2 and Ultra Autocannon 5. We have the LRM-10, the MRM-10, the SRM-2, and the Rocket Launcher 10. Now, some of these can do decent damage, but we've already gone over their damage output. The amount of clusters is just really bad with these. Now, granted, the SRM-2 and a few of these other weapons are light enough, like, you know, the Rocket Launcher 2, where you could have a lot of them and really, you know, really deal a lot in volume, but that's sort of the point value you get for having it be very light and also having it not take up a lot of space is all going to be handled by the future category of space and weight. And when it comes to clusters, these all just, they flunk. They do not make it. So now let's move on to the D ranking weapons that we have for the cluster hitting category. The D rank for the cluster hitting category has only a single weapon in it. It is the Streak SRM-2. And the reason is it is guaranteed to hit with 2 clusters. Whereas all the others, if you roll low, will really just hit with 1. And is not a very good crit-seeking weapon in that way. Next, moving on to the C rank, we have the following weapons in the C rank. We have the LRM-15. We have the SRM-4, and we have the Rocket Launcher 15. Now, in the case of these 3 weapons, which all made it down to the C rank, you have the chance for a lot more of the clusters to hit the enemy, and therefore a lot better crit seeking. The LRM-15 has an average of 2, and likely is possible to have 3 clusters even to crit seek. The SRM-4 has an average of 2 and can get up to 4 clusters to hit. The Rocket Launcher 15, of course, is a single shot version, basically, of the LRM-15 and does the same as it does, and therefore makes it to the C rank for the same reason. Now, making it to the B rank, here's, of course, where I usually start to feel like we are properly getting into the category of really decent when it comes to this particular category. The proper ranking, B and up, is where I feel like you can properly recommend this weapon for its purpose. So we have the LB5X autocannon that on average is going to have 3 clusters up to a possible of 5. That is really, really pretty decent. We have the LRM-20 that can go, you know, usually on average around 2, but can go all the way up to 4 possible clusters of 5 damage each. Really nice. MRM-20 for the same exact reason. SRM-6, because on average 3 are going to hit with 2 damage each, but you could get up to 6 clusters on this baby. And then the Streak SRM-4, because it has a guaranteed 4 clusters hitting. always 4 clusters hitting, which is amazing. And then we have the Rocket Launcher 20 for the same reason that the LRM and the MRM 20 make it to the B rank. So moving on to the A rank, we're getting really high up here. We have the LB 10X autocannon that could possibly have 10 clusters if you roll Epic. Again, half that on an average roll, but if you roll Epic, a possible 10 clusters hitting the enemy. We have the MRM 30. Now with 5-point clusters, if you roll Epic, you're talking about 6 possible clusters hitting the enemy with 5 damage each, which is why I edged it out a rank higher than the SRM 6, because I did feel like the extra damage that it does means it's better at peeling off a little bit of armor that is left to find a hole to cause some crit seeking. And finally, we have the Streak SRM6, which is guaranteed to always have 6 clusters of 2 damage each. Finally, we make it to the S rank. Now, the S rank on clusters has only 2, and I mean that, only 2 weapons in it. It is the LB20X autocannon and the MRM30, and that is because the LB20X autocannon has the possibility of doing 20 damage in a single shot, split up into a possible 20 clusters, while the MRM30 does 5 damage in each cluster and can do a possible of 8 clusters, which is just crazy. So because of that, both of them get top marks when it comes to the cluster category. So moving on, we're going to move into the range category for all of these weapons. So starting off with the F rank, every SRM and every Streak SRM gets a F grade in this category. Because while I don't fully believe that they are worthless, that they should get no points for their range, when I organized it, they all had the same range, and it was not very good. It was definitely beaten head and shoulders above them by everything else in the range category. So all SRM and Streak SRMs get the F grade. So moving on to the D rank, we have the LB20X autocannon. It may not have a great range, but it beats out the SRMs. And we have the Rocket Launcher 20, which unfortunately has a fairly short range compared to some of the other rocket launchers. Moving on to the C rank, we have all of the MRMs. All MRM launchers, regardless of size, have the exact same range, and they fit perfectly right here as the C rank. Moving on to the B rank, we have the LB10X autocannon, which significantly improves the range over all of the previously mentioned weapons, as well as the Rocket Launcher 10, which are very close in range. Moving on to A, we start to get weapons that can really reach out and touch somebody at incredible distances, very far out. We have the LB5X autocannon, as well as the Ultra Autocannon 5. We have all of the LRMs. All of these weapons can really hit people, 20 plus hexes away, which is incredibly long range when it comes to inner sphere weaponry of the clan invasion time period. And finally, we have nothing left but the S rank, and this one might surprise you a little bit for what it is that excels here, but it is the LB2X autocannon and the Ultra Autocannon 2. Nothing else had the amazing rank of these weapons. Quick reminder, the LB2X autocannon goes up to 27 hexes away. That is incredibly good. The Ultra Autocannon 2 is only a little bit behind it with 25 hexes. I really hope the LB2X autocannon and the Ultra Autocannon 5 savor this win. They will not get many of them, but one of the few places they do excel is really amazing range. Moving on to the heat scale. So this is purely based on how much heat these weapons put out. So we have, with the F rank in the heat scale, only a couple of weapons. There's only a couple of weapons that just put out so much heat they had to go all the way down to the F rank, and that is the MRM 30 and the MRM 40. And that is because they put out 10 and 12 heat respectively. These things are incredibly heat intensive. Now, I do like these weapons, but when it comes to the heat scale, yeah, they flunk. These things will really overheat your mech unless you have a ton of double heat sinks, so it can be an issue. Moving on to the D rank in the heat scale, we have the LB20X autocannon. We have the LRM20. We have the MRM20. Now, these weapons do dish out a lot of heat, but they are still significantly cooler than those horrible MRM 40 and MRM 30. For instance, the MRM 20 only deals out 6 heats. You can see it is head and shoulders above the much hotter weapons below them on this ranking. Next, at the C rank, we have the LRM 15, which drops down to only about 5 heat, which is not too bad at all. And we have the rocket launcher 20. Moving up to the B rank, where we have actually some seriously heat-efficient weapons, we have the LRM-10, we have the MRM-10, we have the SRM-4, we have the SRM-6, we have the Streak SRM-4, the Streak SRM-6, the Rocket Launcher 10, and the Rocket Launcher 15, because all these weapons do not put out a lot of heat at all, and are just, part of the many weapons that you have to deal with when regarding your heat, but not a singular weapon that is going to cause all of your heat. Moving on to the A rank, we have some amazingly heat-efficient weapons. We have the LB10X autocannon. We have the Ultra Autocannon 2, which is keeping in mind the fact that it could do double heat if it fires both shots. We have the Ultra Autocannon 5. Same thing. It is taking for granted that you are firing both shots from that weapon. We have the SRM2 and we have the Streak SRM2. And finally, for the S rank, for heat, we have, again, the LB2X autocannon, and in this case, now the LB5X autocannon. And you might be thinking to yourself, because maybe you don't use these weapons that much, and I forgive you if you don't, because generally speaking, I don't use the LB2 and LB5X autocannon that much. I don't usually rate them very highly for my own personal rankings. But you might be wondering, why did they make it all the way up to S tier? And the reason is that they each only create a single heat for their respective mechs. The next category is space and weight. So here we are giving these weapons rankings based on not just their weight, but also how many criticals they take up. And I did take into account criticals mandatory for certain amounts of ammo. Weapons that don't get a lot of shots per ammo bin, and also weapons that you really need to use multiple types of ammo to use them more effectively, I would have required 2 tons and 2 spaces when figuring out, where they are on this list. So let's start with the Fs. For the F ranking of the space and weight category, there was only one weapon that went all the way down to the F ranking, and it's the LB20X autocannon. As much as I love this weapon, and believe me, I do, there was no choice but to give this the F ranking. It is just way too weight and space consuming. We're talking about 14 tons. We're talking about 11 crits, and we're talking about a minimum of 2 more tons in crits for ammunition if you want to use this thing in a normal size game and you want to have both cluster and solid shot rounds. But in a long game or in a campaign, you actually probably want a mech that has 3 to 4 tons of ammo. So yeah, this had to make it all the way down to the F ranking. So unfortunately, the only weapon in the F ranking is the LB20X autocannon. Moving on to the D ranking, we have a few weapons in the D ranking. We have the LB10X autocannon. We have the LRM20. We have the MRM30 and MRM40. Now, all of these take up quite a bit of weight and quite a bit of space, but none of them anywhere near as bad as that LB20X autocannon. Moving up to the C ranking, we have quite a few in the C ranking. We have the LB2X autocannon, we have the LB5X autocannon, we have the Ultra Autocannon 2 and Ultra Autocannon 5. Especially sad that these didn't make it higher than the C, considering none of them do a huge amount of damage, though they do have great range. We have the LRM 15, we have the MRM 20, which made it significantly higher thanks to its lower weight and space, which is probably attributed to the shorter range of its weapon than a lot of its longer range counterparts. Moving past the C rankings, we have the B ranked weapons for space and weight, where we have the LRM-10 and the Streak SRM-6. So the LRM-10 and the Streak SRM-6 both fit nicely in this area where they took a similar amount of weight and a similar amount of space. Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here for the B ranking. The LRM-10 has 5 tons and 2 crits, while the SRM-6 has 3 tons and 2 crits. So they're much closer than a lot of the other rankings were, and just really getting much more acceptable in regard to the amount of weight and space they are taking up. So now let's move on to the A tier. There's actually quite a few weapons that made it up to the A tier. We have the MRM-10, the SRM-4, the SRM-6, and the Streak SRM-4. These are all getting much lighter and much smaller. Now moving on to the S tier, the creme de la creme when it comes to space and weight, we have the SRM-2, the Streak SRM-2, and all 3 rocket launchers. So let's talk about them a little bit. I want to just tell you how amazingly efficient these things are when it comes to space and weight. So the SRM-2, we're talking about 1 ton and 1 crit. Now, granted, you're going to have at least a ton of ammo, if not more. Occasionally, if you were trying to fire multiple types of ammo out of your SRMs, like if you're firing heat inferno rounds as well as regular missile rounds, yes, a single SRM-2 will be outnumbered by its ammunition weight and space. However, generally you take SRMs in groups and then have 1 ton of each because there are a lot of ammo in those tons. So in reality, you have less than a ton and a crit for the ammo for most SRM-2 using mechs, because that is usually how you organize it. Now, the Streak SRM-2 is only a little heavier at 1.5 tons, but still only 1 crit. So again, incredibly weight and space conscientious, if you will. And the rocket launchers all hover around the low single digits for space and weight, sometimes less than a ton. There are a few that are only 0.5 tons. So yeah, these are incredibly low weight, low crit numbers for these weapons, for cluster hit weapons. Now is the category that I do the most discussing in because it has the most to talk about. It is the intangibles. So we're going to start with the F ranking weapons and the intangibles and move our way up like we've been doing. So we're going to start with the LB2X autocannon. Gets a flunk. It is an F. Now you might be saying, but Captain, it has 2 types of ammo. And that's right. It has solid shot, which can do 2 damage, and cluster shot, which can do two single clusters of 1 damage. They're both useless. This is a terrible, terrible weapon. I do not recommend it to anyone. It really didn't get anything in the intangibles for me, and that is why I gave it an F rank. Next, we have the Ultra Autocannon 2. Slightly better than the LB2X autocannon, but without the multiple kinds of ammo. That actually kind of brought it back down. 2 possible clusters of 2 damage each. It's really just not good. Finally, we have the Rocket Launcher 10 and the Rocket Launcher 15. Now, the thing is, when it comes to intangibles for these, you have 1 type of ammo they can fire, and it is 1 shot each, and then they are done. They are empty. Generally speaking, the only really positives on intangibles for them is that they are being as light as they are. You can take groups of them, even on smaller mechs, and have a one-trick pony of unloading with tons of cluster rounds at your enemy with a light mech or a medium mech loaded up with a bunch of rocket launcher 10s and 15s. But then that mech is kind of useless afterwards. If it doesn't kill the enemy, the enemy's gonna turn around and beat up on it, and it just lost all the weapons from its all the ammo from its main weapons. That's it. So yeah, generally speaking, not a huge fan of rocket launchers. unless you have them in large numbers in a very expendable mech. And also the Rocket Launcher 10 really doesn't do a lot for that one shot. The Rocket Launcher 15 is only marginally better. So moving up to the D ranking, we have the LB5X autocannon. So here's where we start to get a place where there's a little more value to the two types of ammo. 5 damage is not armor piercing, but it's okay if you're looking to try to earlier punch holes rather than find the holes. So you can punch holes a little bit with that 5 damage with solid shot before using the clusters to find the damage. Plus the extra benefit, of course, of getting a +1 to hit at fairly long range with the LB5X autocannon is decent, especially since, again, you're doing significantly more damage than you are with the LB2X. So I gave it a little bit of a head and shoulders above the LB2X, and I gave the LB5X a D ranking. Next, we have the Ultra Autocannon 5. 2 shots at 5 damage each. This is a possibility for crit seeking, a possibility to do 5 damage in 2 places, to even just pierce already weakened but not completely gone armor and find the holes. This is a significant improvement over the Ultra Autocannon 2, in my opinion. So I decided to bring it up to that D ranking. Next, we have the MRM-10. Now, the MRM-10 gets some bonuses for a little bit for not having a minimum range, though it has a significantly shorter range than its LRM counterpart. You have the possibility, on average, to usually have 2 clusters. That's not bad. But again, these are still D rankings. They're not really making it out of the what I would still consider kind of negative. And because that one shot is much more valuable than its smaller counterparts, the Rocket Launcher 20 makes it to the D rank. Now let's move up to the C rank. So here we have finally at least good weapons, things that I would recommend taking as cluster weapons in regard to the intangibles anyway, in regard to this category. And we have the LB10X autocannon. This thing can fire a possible 10 clusters. This starts to get really good. It gets, again, a -1 to hit its target when shooting cluster rounds. You can also shoot solid rounds, and at 10 damage each, these solid rounds are considered armor piercing. So this is a weapon that can properly do double duty, and it is why I put the LB10X autocannon in the C rank. We have the LRM-10 that can do up to 10 damage in 2 possible locations, again at really long range. This one is much more useful. Granted, it does have a minimum range, which is why it doesn't quite make it out of the C tier. We have the MRM-20. Though it does way more damage than that LRM-10, the much shorter range for it does hold it back a little bit, but you can have up to 4 clusters of up to 5 damage each, and that has to bring it up a bit. It's the 5 damage in some of the clusters, because usually the final cluster will be smaller, but the 5 damage in those clusters being able to punch through weakened armor and actually still cause a crit chance versus something that only does 2 damage. If you have something with like 4 armor left in a location not being able to make it through, it's that little bit of extra damage. Plus, if you randomly hit something in the head with something that causes 5 damage versus 2 damage, of course, that is a significantly better amount of damage to do in a place that only has 9 armor. Next, we have the SRM-2. 2 clusters again with 2 damage each. This is really decent, but it's obviously not better than, say, an LRM-10 or an MRM-20. What makes this stand out head and shoulders above is the multiple ammunition types. The SRM-2, of course, could be loaded up with Inferno rounds, and then if it is loaded up with Inferno rounds, can do heat instead of damage, or of course, could be used to, when you're playing with advanced rules and the ability to light forest on fire, can be used to light terrain on fire. And then we have the Streak SRM-2, which cannot use the multiple ammo types, but is guaranteed to always hit with 2 clusters. Now, moving up to the B rank with the properly good intangibles, really, really solid stuff, we have the LRM-15, which can hit with up to 3 clusters of up to 5 damage each at a very decent range. And in a much shorter range, we have the MRM-30 that can hit with as many as twice as many of those clusters and has no minimum range. And we have the SRM-4, which again, larger amounts than the SRM-2 and also can use the Inferno rounds. The Inferno rounds are really what bring those regular SRMs up higher for me because of the ability to choose, do you want to do damage or do you want to overheat your mech? Keep in mind that when causing heat from outside sources, a mech can take as much as 15 extra heat, which can be really amazing, especially with certain laser boat mechs that are prone to overheating themselves. And finally, in the B tier rank, we have the Streak SRM4, which is guaranteed to have 4 clusters of 2 damage each. That is a lot, and that is awesome. Now, for the A tier, we have the LB20X autocannon. This thing is amazing. Again, you have the possibility to use it as an armor-piercing weapon with 20 damage in one space, and then as its own cluster hit weapon with up to 20 clusters of 1 each to find the holes. The LB20X autocannon is fantastic. We have the LRM-20, which has the possibility to throw out up to 4 clusters with up to 5 damage each at incredible range. This is a fantastic cluster hitting weapon. We have the SRM-6 that can shoot up to 6 clusters at short range, but can do them with Inferno rounds as well. And we have the Streak SRM-6, which is able to put out a crazy amount of, count them, 6 clusters of 2 damage each that automatically all fire as long as you hit the target. And finally, we have the S tier where we have the MRM-40, which I told you was going to be getting extra points from me for its intangibles category because of its head and shoulders above the damage of everything else. And I really just did not have enough rankings back when we were ranking the damage. Okay, so are you ready? Because now we are going to list where all of these wound up. When I tallied the points that they earned for each category, where did these weapons wind up? And I gotta tell you, there are some surprises in here. There's some things that didn't do as well as I thought they would do, and there's some things that did better than I thought they would do with my ranking systems. Okay, so starting off with the F tier, we have the LB2X autocannon. Not a surprise, it's terrible. We have the Ultra autocannon 2, the SRM2. I really kind of feel like this, because of the amount of them you can put on a mech, this might have been ranked a little low just because the ranking system sort of took into consideration that you have one of them. There is the fact that you can have a lot of them. I don't know, but it wound up here with my ranking system. What can I say? Then we have the Ultra Autocannon 5, the MRM 10, and the Rocket Launcher 10. Little surprised also about the MRM 10 being so low. Then in the D ranking, we have the MRM 20, the Streak SRM2, the SRM4, and the LRM10. Again, surprised that the SRM4 ranked as low as it did. I actually am a big fan of various SRMs. Granted, I usually try to aim for SRM6s, mind you, but lots of SRM2s and lots of SRM4s can be just as good. Next, in the C tier, we have the LB20X autocannon. Really surprised this is not higher. We have the LRM-15, the MRM-15, and the Rocket Launcher 15. I'm also a little surprised that the Rocket Launcher 15 made it this high. I generally thought it was going to be lower. Then we have the B tier. So for the B tier, we have the LB5X autocannon. Really surprised this made it this high. Along with the LB10X autocannon, not surprised this was this high. The Streak SRM4 and the Rocket Launcher 20. Also, not really surprised the Rocket Launcher 20 is this high because I do appreciate a light mech with a couple of Rocket Launcher 20s on it. That can be a fun surprise, and being that it's light, you know that it's once it gets close, it's probably going to get chewed up anyway. Next, in the A tier, we have only 2 weapon systems that made it up to the A tier. We have the LRM-20 and the SRM-6. Both phenomenal weapons, not a surprise to me. And then for the S tier, for cluster hitting weapons, the creme de la creme, we have the MRM-40 and the Streak SRM-6. Both of these are fantastic weapons. They were not a surprise to me. I knew they were going to be incredibly high ranked, and they were. So there you have it. If you enjoyed this video, and I hope you did, please comment down below. Let me know what you thought of where these wound up. Did some of them surprise you? Would you use a different ranking system to rank cluster hidden weapons? How would you have ranked them? What categories would you have used? How would you have scored the points? Also, let me know, should I keep doing more of these? Should I do another one for small arms? I was thinking one for small arms for things like, say, autocannon 5s, autocannon 2s, medium lasers, ER medium lasers, medium pulse lasers, things that don't really fit into these sort of categories. It might be fun to do a video on that. Let me know if you want to see that, and if this gets a really decent amount of views like the first video did, I may do another installment. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.